Okay. All right, we'll call to order the Planning Commission meeting of Monday, January 28th, 2019. First item on the agenda is public comments on items that are not on our agenda. I don't see any cards, but is there anyone in the audience wishing to make a comment on items not on the agenda? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to item number 3, electronic messaging policy explanation. Ms. Riggs.
Thank you, Planning Commission. My name is Katie Riggs. I'm the city recorder here for the City of Oregon City. Thank you for allowing me to come before you tonight to explain an update to the City Commission policy, which has now become a boards and commissions policy. This is something that the City Commission has decided to move forward with. They have updated their email or electronic messaging policy to include all boards and commissions and committees of Oregon City. Particularly, it's going to affect the Planning Commission, the Historic Review Board, and the Urban Renewal Commission at this time. In the future, we may go ahead and implement it for all boards and commissions, but for now, we're just doing the ones that have decision-making authority that are binding, that could be litigated in the future. We, over the last several years, have, as some of you may know, have had several litigations, a lot with Planning Commission or HRB decisions, and we get public records requests or legal discoveries asking for emails that one particular or several of the members may or may not have received, and it's easier for the city to be able to manage that if you are issued a city email address. So that's where we're starting at tonight, and I would like to begin with just a little bit of an overview of what is a public record. And so we are coming from a time where this is what we used to have, a lot of paper, and a lot of our records used to be paper. And now we're moving to something more like this, which is a lot of our messaging and correspondence, even for business-related things, is via email, text message, social media even. There's all sorts of things out there. So I'd like to start tonight by just explaining a little bit about what a public record is. So a public record means any information that is prepared, owned, used, or retained by the city, relates to an activity, transaction, or function of the city, and it's necessary for satisfying the fiscal, legal, administrative, or historical policies, requirements, or needs of the city. So as you know, you guys hear a lot of information. You're up here making decisions for the city on behalf of the city, and so the things that come before you are public records, the agendas, the minutes, all of the items that are submitted in your agenda packets. If you're writing notes during the meeting, those can, depending upon the content, be considered a public record. Your emails are considered a public record if it has to do with city business, again, depending upon the content. So being able to separate out personal from your position here on the Planning Commission is a very important piece, and kind of knowing what is and is not a public record goes along with that. So just to point out at the bottom, there's the ORS that explains what a public record is, and you can always Google it online in Oregon, and it will provide you the definition as well. So things that are not a public record: extra copies, convenience copies, publications, voicemail messages. Those are just a few of several items that are not considered an actual public record. And then we do get, especially with email, we get a lot of redundant, outdated, and trivial information. So if you're sending an email, one commissioner to another saying, hey, let's meet for lunch and, get together, that particular email is it doesn't rise to the level of being a public record. Now, if you start discussing a decision that you made at the Planning Commission last night, then that would become a public record. But if you're just discussing having lunch, or you wanted to get together for a meeting, or you want to change the date or the time or the schedule of a meeting, you can delete those emails. Those emails are just trivial, extra information. They're not rising to the level of a public record. Why manage public records? Obviously, I think I mentioned that at the beginning, the regulatory compliance, and we want to minimize our legal risks, both your personal risk and the city's risk as well. So this is going to help both you and us protect you. Help us help you. We do get public records requests, and if you personally get a public records request, either through your personal email or your city-provided email, please feel free to direct them to the city's website. We have a place on our website where they can fill out a public records request form, and all those requests should come through me. So even if they're asking for something you specifically have, like they're asking for your email, they should come and fill out the records request form through the city first, and then we would contact you directly to talk about providing those emails if they're releasable and what it is they're looking for. As I mentioned, some emails, text messages, calendars, notebooks, those sorts of things. If you're using it for city business, you're using it for your position here on the Planning Commission, writing notes and that sort of stuff is a public record when you get done with your position. If you keep one notebook and you have just the dates on it and you keep the same notebook, just go ahead and turn that into either Laura or Pete at the end of your term. That would be a great way to keep all of your notes in one binder, and you wouldn't be mixing it with your personal things. You would just have one public notebook. Let's see. So under the Oregon Public Records Law, email and text messages are records depending upon the content, and anyone can request those. So if you happen to get an email to your personal email and it has to do with your position here on the Planning Commission, we would prefer that you forward that to your city-issued email and then respond from your city-issued email so that that's captured. That's the best procedure we would like you to follow so that we're all being very consistent and we're getting all of those emails captured. Also, if you receive, which this is in the policy, and I think the policy was in your packet, so I didn't bring a copy tonight, I apologize for that. But in the policy, there's a few guidelines in there. We ask that you check your email at least twice a week. That way if there's information that the city's trying to provide to you, you're aware of it and you're up to date. Also, the nights that you have meetings, we prefer you check your email at least that day or afternoon. And if you've received any sort of public comment or any kind of letter or email regarding any of the items that you're going to be talking about, that you go ahead and forward those on to the community development director and then also to the city recorder. We would keep a record of that, and then that's something that if it needs to be disclosed, you guys would talk about that at the meeting that night. And if there's any questions regarding any of those types of items, I'm sure that the community development director and the city attorney can help you with those, or the city recorder's office as well. Just basically, there is very little privacy when it comes to your email address that we provided you, the city issued email address. So if you're using the city email address, then please use it for just city business and don't mix your personal and your professional email address. If you're using your personal email address for city business, then know that in a court of law, that they could subpoena your email records, your personal email records, even your computer, and search it if they have any kind of probable cause to do so. So let's try to be really consistent and just use the city issued email and not mix your personal and professional email address. As I mentioned before, the new email policy, these are the boards and commissions that it affects. And the one major thing with the city's email policy, not necessarily the city commission policy, but all of our email is managed by the city. And with the city has a policy that any email that is deleted will be permanently deleted 90 days after the date that email has been received. So please do not delete anything that is a public record. If it has to do with your city business, you just leave it in your email account. You can set up file folders, and you can go ahead and drag and drop them into file folders if you want, or you can leave them in your inbox. And at the end of your term, we will go ahead and consolidate your box, and we'll put that into our electronic records management system, so you won't have to do any of the managing of that. Just don't delete any of your public records in your email, in your inbox, and then any sent emails. So you, as a user, will be responsible for any of the emails that you've sent, and then any emails that you have received from outside of the city. So if a citizen were to email you, and only you, and it didn't go to the rest of the planning commissioners, or it didn't go to the community development director or one of the planners, then you will be responsible for managing that email. So make sure that you keep that email and obviously pass it on to the appropriate liaison. And this just tells you that the sender is usually the responsible party for the official record and the custodian. It is unlawful to purposely destroy email if you know it's a public record. So please do not do so. And there are other resources out there for boards and committees. I have not come before you before to talk about these, and I know that we're not handing out actual manuals before, but there are board, committee, and commission manuals for all members. They're located on our website. The address is listed there, but then I think I also have a picture here. If you're on our city website and you hover over the government tab at the top, there is the boards and committees link there in blue. If you click on that, then you'll see the page that's behind there up here. And at the bottom there, it says Boards, Commissions, Orientation Manual. So if you click on that, that will bring you up to an entire page that you can go through with resources of information that if you're not aware of it, you might want to just browse through there and take a look. And if you ever have questions about that, please contact the City Recorder's Office, and we'd be more than happy to assist you with any other information. And here's our contact information. Is there any questions I can answer for you tonight?
Everybody okay?
Yeah.
All right.
And I set your emails up before the meeting, so please try those at home, and I gave you the access sheet. And again, if you have any questions, I will be able to assist you with that, or our IT department. Thank you so much for the time tonight.
I'd like to take a chance and emphasize what Katie said. It's a pain in the butt kind of to have multiple email accounts, and you may think, I just have my Gmail account, I'll just run everything through that. It's not an idle threat. There are people who have had their personal computers subpoenaed and brought in and dealt with. If you can consistently show that, no, anytime I got any Oregon City related stuff, I forwarded it and worked out of there, you should be, safe from that. So take the time and do it right, and your life will be much better.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, next item on our agenda is a public hearing for GLUA 18-00040 general land use application, and there are several items under that. So I'll open that public hearing, and I get to read the script. GLUA 18-00040 public hearing on land use application is scheduled for tonight. A staff report has been prepared for the application and has been made available to the public 7 days before the public hearing. The staff report identifies the approval criteria that apply to each applicant's proposal. Staff has analyzed the criteria which are contained in the staff report. The quasi-judicial hearing procedure that the commission will follow is set out in state law and the Oregon City Municipal Code. The hearing procedure steps are shown on the chart on the wall over there. Anyone wishing to speak should fill out a speaker's card and give it to the planning staff before the hearing or now. Speakers will proceed in the order in which their card is received. You should fill out your address on the card so the city will notify you of the final decision. For the public record, please begin all testimony stating your name and city of residence. Testimony and evidence should be directed toward the applicable approval criteria. If you believe other criteria apply in addition to those addressed in the staff report, identify and discuss those criteria and explain how and why you believe they apply to the application under consideration. A person may submit any written material while the public record is open on each application. Any written materials received by the city staff during the time period in which the record is open will be placed in the record. Written materials submitted during the public hearing must be presented to the city staff in order to become part of the record. If a person intends for PowerPoint presentations, oversized poster boards, reports, pictures, or other exhibits used in their oral testimony to be placed in the record, copies must be submitted to the city staff while the record is open. If they are not given to staff, they will not be included in the record. Any person wishing a continuance to present additional evidence and testimony or to keep the record open to respond to new evidence must make that request before the public testimony portion of the hearing is closed. If the Planning Commission makes a decision with which you disagree, any issue that you wish to appeal must have been raised for the consideration of the the Planning Commission, or LUBA, or both. Without raising the issue on the record with sufficient specificity and accompanied by statements or evidence that the city and all parties can respond, the issue will not be deemed appealable to the State Land Use Board of Appeals. In addition, the failure of an applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Okay, so at this time, we'll ask each commissioner if they have any ex parte contacts, conflicts of interest, bias, or any other statement to declare, and if you have visited the site. Commissioner Mahoney.
I drive by the site occasionally. I have no ex parte contact to declare.
Okay. Commissioner Johnson.
Pretty much ditto. I drive by it occasionally, have not driven by specifically to gather any information on this, and no ex parte contact.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Stoll.
I also drive by it occasionally. Additionally, I attended the Natural Resources Committee meeting on January 9th where this topic was discussed.
Ex parte contacts?
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Schlagenhoff.
I drove through it about a week ago, but not related to this. Just went through the roundabout, short cut, and no ex parte contact.
Okay. Commissioner Gage.
I have gone through there this weekend a couple of times and no ex parte
Okay.
contact.
And I have visited the site, including over the weekend. And I don't think it's an ex parte contact, but just to be clear, I want to say that I do serve as an Urban Renewal Commissioner, and this project has come before the Urban Renewal Commission in public hearings and in executive sessions. So I have been a part of those discussions, more centered on the financial aspects of the project. But I just want to be clear about that.
I do want to make a correction. I have talked with Jerry Herman over the phone about the natural resource overlay zone on the telephone this morning, as a matter of fact. But there was no exchange of ideas in support or denial thereof. It was just his exchange of information regarding it. That's I guess it would be referred to as ex parte contact.
Okay. Thank you. Does anyone in the audience wish to question any of the commissioners about their disclosures? Okay. Seeing none, we'll begin with the staff report. Mr. Walter.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioners, and welcome. My name is Pete Walter, and tonight we're reviewing the master plan amendment for the Cove Phase 2. It has numerous applications associated with the general land use application. My goal tonight is to try to summarize as much as I can. We're going to be principally concentrating this evening on the adjustments that the applicant has requested, but the focus of this application is to receive permission for early grading. This is an aerial photograph of the site and the ownership. Majority of the site is owned by the Urban Renewal Agency of Oregon City. You can see lot 2 at bottom left is a lot which has already been developed with the garden apartments. This aerial photo doesn't reflect that. And the applicant, The Cove LLC, is requesting approval of following applications via this process, a Type 3 Planning Commission review process. A conceptual development plan amendment with development code adjustments, a detailed development plan for site grading, a subdivision application which modifies the previous plat, a floodplain overlay district permit, a natural resource overlay district permit, and a geologic hazard overlay district permit. Just to go back through the years on this plan, the first master plan for the Cove was approved back in 2008. It has been amended multiple times, 2009 through currently. And it has multiple prior adjustments to development standards, which are still vested and still apply to the property, as well as there have been multiple amendments to the phasing. So we're really going to concentrate on what is proposed now, just for simplicity. And as Mike mentioned, there is a separate process and agreements with the Urban Renewal Authority. None of the Urban Renewal Authority's decisions or agreements affect what you are reviewing this evening. It's all going to be based on the municipal code and the criteria in our staff report. So it is a 92-acre area. It implements the comprehensive plan, the waterfront master plan, the downtown community plan. This is an area that is part of our mixed-use downtown zoning, which extends clear down to the Blue Heron site. The conceptual development plan is proposed to be developed in 4 phases, which I'll go through those briefly. This amendment includes a request for early grading. There are some changes to the master plan's buildings, changes to phasing, some new street sections for Agnes Avenue, which are conceptual. And as I mentioned, adjustments to this code, and we'll go through those. The actual proposal here is to increase the apartment units to 404 for phase 2. It reduces the amount of office space in the previous 2015 proposal significantly. There will be 2 restaurants of approximately 4,000 square feet, 1 high quality, 1 high turnover, and about 6,800 square feet of retail space. And this is our general site plan for the area. You can see the 8 buildings that are proposed along the waterfront and the parking lot that separates the buildings from Agnes Avenue. Phasing that's proposed for phase 2, this is the southern portion of the site. Phase 1 was already under construction, that's the garden apartments. Phase 2A, which is what we're reviewing the grading for this evening, consists of lot grading for 5 building pads, lots 3 through 10. Lot 1 is going to be an area that has residential and commercial use, but that's not part of this proposal. There's not a detailed development plan proposal for that right now. The northern portion of phase 2 is shown here. It includes grading out the site for the North Park and grading the area that is proposed for the natural resource area tract and the pads for 3 buildings. The subdivision will include 8 lots and 4 tracts. The phase 2A buildings are 1 through 5 and buildings 6 through 8. The tracts will encompass areas for parkland and open space. And the diagram that's shown here is not very easy to read up, but it shows the differences between the existing plat and the current proposed plat. So basically, we're going to have additional lots along the waterfront for those additional buildings. It was previously 6 lots along the waterfront. Now it's 8. It's within the flood area that's regulated by FEMA and regulated by our city code 1742. There's a variety of construction and development standards in this section of code, one of which is that all habitable spaces have to be built above the flood elevation. And it also requires that you balance, cut, and fill in the floodplain. So there's a significant amount of engineering work that has to be done to grade the site and show that it can balance, cut, and fill. And the grading of the banks along the cove is a necessary part of that. And that's also related to the need to grade the banks back for habitat enhancement as well, which we'll talk about. As I mentioned, there's some steep banks along the cove. It's a former gravel quarry, and it has been affected by erosion over the years as well. So there's areas of that are significantly steep, over 35% slope. This area is part of Zone A and B of the relative earthquake hazard map for the Oregon City area. It's not unusual. There's a geologic hazard report and geotechnical recommendations prepared by the firm Apex in the packet. And that indicates that there are not any hazard areas on the site to be avoided. There's a lot of information in that report about what they found when they did borings on the site, and they did a lot of borings on the site to see what's underneath the ground. And then based on those borings and what is proposed for the buildings, they make geotechnical recommendations and attest to the feasibility of the site development based on that. For the natural resources areas, back in 2008, it was called the Water Resource Overlay Zone. Now it's called the Natural Resources Overlay. And it was previously approved for a 50-foot vegetative corridor from the bank, high water mark of the cove. So this area is within our Natural Resources Overlay District, and that protects fish, wildlife habitat. The reports that was submitted by the applicant, prepared by Pacific Habitat Services and Cascade Environmental Group. Those reports have been reviewed by the city's environmental consultant, David Evans and Associates, and they have recommended certain conditions that be applied to the detailed development plan for the buildings, follow through on the mitigation that's proposed for the site following grading. The overall approach for the area with respect to the natural resources areas is to grade back some of the banks and provide a better area for planting. And there's a significant amount of tree replacement required for the tree removal that will occur associated with that. There's a lot of black cottonwood there that is established over the years. And the majority of those black cottonwoods will have to be removed in order to facilitate the site grading and be replaced with native species, which have been recommended in the Habitat Enhancement Plan. There's a small portion of the sites that are impacted by trails and pathways and creating impervious surfaces, and those areas have to be mitigated as well. So the areas that are not just being enhanced through the grading and replanting, but which are impacted by a small amount of square footage of pathways, those areas have to be replanted in proportion to their impact as well. And that's what the Pacific Habitat report is all about. So they recommend removal of non-native species and invasive plant species and revegetation with appropriate species that are suitable for the site. And we have had a couple of public comments in relation to the Natural Resources Overlay District from the Natural Resources Committee as well, and from Jerry Herman. And we can talk about those public comments. Let's see. Okay, sorry. Transportation analysis is based on the 2015 Master Plan Amendment and the generation of trips that were discussed in the traffic impact analysis done by Kittleson Associates. What this amendment does is apply a new trip generation letter that's based on the new mix of uses on the site. And there's a net reduction in vehicle trips associated with this proposal because of the substitution of additional apartments in place of the office space. I'm not going to quote the numbers, but we can talk about that. And our traffic consultant, Replinger and Associates, has determined that all of the requirements for the mobility standards on off-site intersections will be met when you compare the trip generation with this proposal to the 2015 trip analysis that was done on all the safety analysis and crash analysis and the site distance analysis is in that report are good and they're the same. And we're not recommending any additional transportation measures with this proposal beyond the ones that are already conditioned on the master plan. Now we're going to get into the adjustments. So it's time to bear with me and we'll go through these one by one. I do have them listed on one slide as well. So there's a good exhibit in the applicant's packet, which is kind of a key to where these adjustments are. And the findings that we prepared for these are on pages 113 to 133 in the staff report. So let's jump in.
Hey, Pete,
Yeah.
would you like them to ask you questions or have dialogue
Sure, yeah.
after each one, or save them
Well,
to the
yeah,
end?
let's, how would you prefer to tackle these? We can discuss each one as they come up, or, which may be
Any
one way.
feeling from the commissioners?
It'd be easier to tackle things as they come up.
There are 15 of them, so
Yeah.
it might be good.
Yeah, let's hit them as they come up.
Okay,
Are
all
there
right.
some that are grouped together that?
Well, some of them are related to one another and kind of
And you would do
grouped, and
those
I'll try to keep those together, yeah.
Great, okay.
Like the parking lot stuff, for example. Yeah, okay, so the first, and on the applicant's packet, what they've tried to do is arrange them according to, colors, you can see here. But I think it's just easier for us to go through them one by one, so. Here they're listed. We can refer back to this slide and this slide as we need to. Adjustment number 1 involves a request to exceed the 42, sorry, that should be a foot notation. No, that's right, 42 inch. 3.5 foot front yard fence height requirement that we have for, this is a residential type fence requirement that you have for front yards. But in this mixed use project, there are a couple of areas where they're needing to put in a 10-foot wall between buildings A and the Esplanade. And this arrow indicates the location of that. So when you read the fence code, it states that through the land use process, you can request an adjustment to the various fence heights, and that's what the applicant has been doing. It's just makes more sense to include this adjustment with all the master plan adjustments for clarity. The proposal to mitigate for this, and the reason that we interpret this to be the front of the site is because it faces the cove, and the previous master plans have all talked about orienting these buildings towards the cove and the pathway. But do you want to have some clarifications on that? And there are also proposal for 2 9-foot walls in front of building D1. And those are going to be, they're there for the purpose of retaining and keeping the parking lots and areas behind the retaining walls where they need to be underneath the buildings. There's a proposal to mitigate for all of that through landscaping. So that's what they're proposing in this conceptual diagram.
Pete, before you move past that one, just so I can kind of get this in my mind's eye,
Yeah.
if I'm standing in the middle of Main Street
Yeah.
today and looking over at the completed Edgewater buildings, and then I turn around and look at D1, is it kind of at the same height, is it going to be the same sort of feel as what you get from?
No, there's going to be it's going to be higher. I think. It's hard to know without having a perspective drawing of that in comparison. And we might want to ask the applicant that as
Okay.
well. But there's a significant amount of cut and fill associated with the waterfront apartments, and they're going to be putting parking underneath them. So some of that fill that they're going to be using is going to raise those buildings up above the floodplain, and then the parking areas are not habitable spaces, but they'll be underneath the buildings.
Okay.
So that's a
Maybe that's
different,
something the applicant can address.
yeah.
Okay.
A lot of the driver for the building height will come from the floodplain regulations
Yeah.
as well that require the buildings to be 1 foot above the flood elevation.
Okay, so then aren't the Edgewater buildings 1 foot above?
Yeah, so I would assume they'd be comparable, but the applicant can clarify
Okay.
for you.
Cool.
And is the wall basically needed then to retain that extra height relative to the road height?
Yeah. Adjustment number 2 has to do with buildings D, and they are the ones that have live-work units on the ground floor, and that's a separate section of code as far as the window transparency. There's a minimum amount of transparency required for live-work buildings, 50%, and the applicant has proposed 46% instead of 50%. And they're proposing to mitigate this through the use of decorative materials, horizontal relief, patterns, and things like that. The justification for this adjustment is that these live-work buildings are going to be used as live-work spaces. They're not going to be just a retail use in every case. You know, there may be an office use associated with it. But the intent of the standard with transparency is to, provide interaction between the pedestrian and the commercial space. And the applicant has also proposed a pedestrian plaza in between these buildings that would provide, interaction and activity that would help to offset some of that, as well as landscaping. Adjustment number 3 has to do with the orientation of the parking lots. And in previous master plans, the orientation of the buildings towards the cove was the principal issue, and they wanted to be sure that the pedestrian path, or the esplanade as it is, has direct access to the cove, and then the buildings have direct access to the cove and to that pedestrian path. And then you have Agnes Avenue behind it. So our code normally requires that commercial buildings front the street and that all parking lots be located behind them or to the side or underneath them in order to provide that pedestrian activity. And so there's been previous approvals for this orientation. When it came to actually proposing a site plan and new buildings on the site, the applicant was required to show that they would either meet that standard or get an adjustment from it based on this orientation. So they've proposed to locate the parking between the buildings and the street, and you can see the location of that here in the yellow dotted circles. And there's a couple of other adjustments associated with this that we're going to go into, and they have to do with pedestrian access across parking lots. For example, and this is another parking lot one too. So normally if you had one building site, commercial site, the code requires one driveway access per building site. In this case, you have you have 8 building lots and 8 buildings. And they're proposing 4 accesses, but it's all under one ownership. So we consider this all one building site, even though there's 4 lots. They've got slightly fewer than they would if they were all under separate ownerships, and it meets the intent of the code. And it makes sense that they're located in these locations for multiple reasons. Site distance along Agnes Avenue, access into the parking garages, and so that they don't conflict with pedestrian access through the parking lots as well. Adjustment number 5 is related to the request to allow pedestrian pathways to cross the parking lots in order to reach the street. That's not considered direct, which is what the code requires. It's considered indirect, but in this case, it is the only thing that works with the orientation of the building. And so the locations that are shown here would be visually quite separate from the parking lots themselves, and there's separate materials used on the ground to differentiate the pedestrian paths from the parking lots. Adjustment number 6 is screening of mechanical equipment. Our code requires that natural gas meters can't be placed out in locations that are highly visible. So in this case, they're asking to place natural gas meters in various locations along all of the building frontages and to screen those with natural vegetation, which is, we have other types of screening requirements for mechanical equipment, and it has a similar screening requirement, whether it's ground-mounted, wall-mounted, or roof-mounted mechanical equipment. It has to have a vegetative screen that will block up to 80% or more of the view of that, or you have to build some sort of an artificial screen around it. And natural gas meters are a little bit different kind of a beast because they have requirements to be scanned and from people checking the meter and that sort of thing. Adjustment number 7 has to do with our architectural design standards for commercial buildings. We require a certain amount of depth and length of projections along building frontages. So whenever your facade exceeds 100 feet, the intent of this standard is to break up a long, expansive building wall and make it visually interesting. What it means is that if you have a building wall over 100 feet, you've got to modulate that at least 3% for a length of at least 20% of that building wall. And their modulations didn't quite meet that, but they proposed a variety of other modulations of different depths and lengths to offset that. I'm not going to go into all the different projections and depths and lengths, but those are all discussed in the packet. And in addition to that, mitigate with the use of balconies, the use of windows and spacing, trim, material distances, decorative materials. And one thing about the standard that's come up in previous applications is it's not clear whether it applies to all floors or just the ground floor or the top floor or the entire thing. So there's multiple ways that you can make the building visually interesting by articulating ground floors and roof lines as well. And so there's a discussion about that in the application packet, and we feel that they had met the requirements for that. So that would be a request on buildings A and A1 and A2. And adjustment number 8 is tying back to the parking lot. This is for multifamily buildings. We have a similar standard as commercial buildings for parking lots, that you have direct pedestrian connections to the street. And because they have a parking lot between the street and the building, it's going to be indirect, and those locations are indicated here. But for the same reasons, they would be visually separate and safe for pedestrians to cross through the parking lots. And there'd be pavement and landscaping associated with this to mitigate the impact. Adjustment number 9 has to do with architecture and materials. There's a vertical and horizontal modulation standard for buildings, and they're asking to modify that slightly. And that applies to the multifamily buildings as well. So they're very similar kind of standard to the commercial buildings. And then offset it in the same manner, mitigate for that difference in the same way through articulation that is shorter distances but more frequent, and also through the use of balconies and materials, decorative materials, decorative trim, and various other things. So this is a rendering of what they're proposing. And that applies to buildings A and B. All of the buildings are asking for that. Adjustment number 10 has to do with diversity of unit types, and we require a certain number of unit types based on the number of bedrooms in each unit. Once you get over 99 units, I believe that triggers in. So code requires at least 10% of each type of units. For example, studio, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, ADA accessible. And this proposal is for 3 floor plans of 1 bedrooms, 2 types of 2 bedrooms, and 3 bedroom units. And some of those are going to be ADA accessible as well. So, this is a standard that we're proposing to remove from the code with our equitable housing standards, because the market largely dictates the type of bedrooms that are going to be in demand, and there's quite a bit of diversity associated with the floor plans as well. So. Multifamily design standard also has a requirement that you recess or project windows out from the plane of the building wall at least 2 inches. And that is a standard that is very difficult to meet in some situations, because commercial buildings code requirements don't allow you to do that without significant expense, and it may not meet certain requirements as far as the way it's sealed, and there are alternatives to that provide visual relief. This standard also requires a minimum 4-inch wide trim on windows as well. So the alternative proposed here is for a slightly less than 2-inch and a 3.5-inch trim on majority of the windows where it's proposed. And then this is much more of a commercial mixed-use building than a residential building, so I think it's appropriate request. This is another standard that we're proposing to remove from the code as well. With respect to outdoor lighting standards, all of the site would be under one ownership. The lighting that will be proposed with the detailed development plan has to meet our lighting code. We have a general glare prohibition, and we have a requirement that you meet 1/2 foot candle at the property line. In this case, the applicant is anticipating that there would be more than that 1/2 foot candle crossing property lines, and that would be appropriate for them because it's all under one ownership. However, we do have a requirement that, there's a glare prohibition, and it's there to reduce nuisance lighting and that sort of thing. It's also a requirement to provide, as much as you can, dark sky type fixtures, and no lights are allowed to shine into a natural resources area. So when the applicant proposes a detailed development plan after this approval, we've added a condition of approval that they provide a lighting plan that meets the intent of the standard and show that the light trespass will meet the intent of the standard. I think it's important to note that when our code was written for this, there was not a lot of the lighting technology available that there currently is, like LED technology and that sort of thing. So while we don't have an actual proposal for lighting with this plan, I'm confident that the applicant can put together something that will meet the intent of the code. Proposal number 13 is to continue a gravel parking lot which allows people to access the esplanade while construction is going on. We have landscaping standards for parking lots, and a gravel parking lot doesn't meet them. Parking lots are supposed to be paved as well. So with an indefinite period within which this gravel parking lot's going to be used, we were concerned about the visual impact of it, and subsequently we've decided to add a condition of approval that requires a certain amount of shrubs be planted for that temporary gravel parking lot. That's one of the conditions that we've added. Eventually, yeah.
Would there be anything in that as far as maintenance of that lot? Because like, for instance, right now, it's
Yeah.
pretty ruddy.
Bumpy.
There's portions of it that aren't really usable.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that, Mike. Do you know?
I'm sorry.
Laura, do you have any idea about that?
And I just sent us into the weeds, didn't I?
Defer to the applicant on that one.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. Almost there. 14, so parking lots, we have landscaping standards for the exterior of a parking lot. We have landscaping required between a parking lot and a building wall, and we have landscaping requirements for the interior of a parking lot. Here we have a significant amount of underground parking or parking beneath buildings, and this adjustment is to not require any landscaping islands within the underground parking. It's not specified in the code. It's kind of a gray area. It hasn't come up before, but it just makes sense to fold in this requested adjustment now. And what I've indicated here is an example from the southern portion of the site. The yellow shaded areas show where the underground parking is in comparison to the parking lot between Agnes Street and the actual buildings, which does have landscaping islands. And final adjustment number 15 is a similar adjustment regarding fences. So we have a maximum height of a combined fence on a retaining wall of 8.5. In a couple of locations, they have 9 and 10 foot retaining walls for the reasons we previously discussed. And it's a separate section of code, and they're requesting adjustment to that. So criteria for adjustment are listed here. There are 6. An adjustment must equally or better meet the purpose of the regulation. If there's more than one proposed, then the cumulative effect of those has to be consistent with the purpose of the zone, in this case, the mixed-use downtown zone. All Goal 5 resources must be protected to the extent otherwise required by Title 17. Any impacts resulting from those adjustments must be mitigated. If you have an environmental zone, then there must be as few detrimental impacts to that zone as is practicable. And finally, they have to show that the adjustments are consistent with the Oregon City Comprehensive Plan and ancillary documents. So there's a significant chunk of the staff report that deals with goals and policies that are applicable to goals and policies from the comprehensive plan that are specific or applicable to a particular adjustment. We've tried to make those findings match as much as possible. For each of these adjustments we went through, and we provided findings for all 6 of these criteria. And based on that analysis, we feel that all 15 of the adjustments can meet the code as conditioned in the staff report. And we can go back through the staff report and talk about them in more detail. And based on our analysis and the findings in the staff report, we're recommending approval with conditions of this application. So thank you.
Any other questions for Pete at this time?
How many hours did you put? I'm gonna get this out on the table.
I gotta say thanks to Laura for finishing up the staff report for me.
So for the record, how many hours you got in this, Pete?
I don't know, 40?
40 hours? How many hours do we get to deliberate on this? 40? Huh, 40?
Call it
Welcome to
40.
the NFL.
All right, at this point, we'll move on to the applicant testimony for 15 minutes. And please introduce yourself and your city of residence.
Sorry, there's one other thing I neglected to mention. On condition of approval number 21, we wanted to make some modifications to it, and that's what I've listed here. The specific changes are listed, underlined in red. So that's a fairly straightforward one. Thank you. Sorry, go ahead.
Thanks, Pete. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. My name is Reed Stapleton. I'm a land use planner with a company in town called Dow. We're working with Deacon, the applicant, on the project, on both the land use application, preparing the application, and the civil engineering, and corralling the team to prepare the packet that you have before you. First thing, and I think it's a segue from one of the commissioner's comments, we want to thank staff. Staff put in a monumental effort. We submitted in early December. The fact that we're at a hearing today is, I think, testimony to the significant effort of staff and the importance of the project as a public-private partnership, and I think one that will do amazing things for this waterfront and really create I think a special amenity to the city as well as the residents of this project. Secondly, I wanted to introduce our team. We have a couple of members from the Deacon construction company, Deacon Development, Ryan Shira and Armin Malazzo, and we have our project architect, Paul Bowney from LRS Architects. Diego Arguella is here from Kittleson Associates, our traffic engineer. John Van Staveren's here from Pacific Habitat Services, and then my partner, Mike Toll, the civil engineering project manager, is here as well. So we have lots of folks here to answer your questions. I won't belabor all the adjustments, and it's with a staff report that's 130 pages or whatever it ended up becoming. I won't get into a lot of details. I will say that when we were approaching the application and looking at the adjustments and looking at some of these code sections that didn't quite perfectly fit the project and some of the details of the projects, it was apparent in looking at the pending code updates that the city was working on that some of those code updates that are pending actually would resolve some of these issues where we're requesting adjustments. So but purely due to the timing of the project and the need for us to push this application forward so that we're in a position to construct in this, do our mass grading in this construction season, it became important for us to submit the application under the current code and request the adjustments and work with staff and the commission on that. And then I think as Pete indicated, you probably saw that some of those were common. They were multiple adjustments, but really for the same issue. For instance, one related to wall heights within the front setback, but then in that same section, there's also a wall height issue that also came up. So some of those are kind of duplications of the same issue, but they're multiple adjustments because they affect different code sections. So with that, I think there were a couple of things that came up, questions that I think fell back to the applicant that we'll try to address. And I'm going to pull up Mike Toll, who is the civil PM, but I think the two things I jotted down, one was the building heights relative to the first phase. And then I think there was also a question about the maintenance of the parking lot on lot one.
Thanks, Commission. Mike Toll with Dow Civil Engineer. So with regards to the building height, they're the same, effectively the same finished floor, again, due to the floodplain. However, with the D South building, which is the building closest to Main Street, because it's of its proximity to Main Street and wanting to get kind of more of that building frontage on Main Street for some of those live work units and just get the building frontage that the city would like along Main Street, it resulted in walls instead of some of the slopes and walls that are on the phase one side. So with respect to finished floors, they're going to be the same elevation. The buildings are going to be roughly the same scale if you're standing on Main Street. And then with regards to the kind of maintenance of the gravel parking lot, I think gravel parking lots certainly don't hold up, forever. So I think with this phase, we can certainly, regrade that lot and get it back into the condition it was when it was first installed with phase one.
So I didn't have any other prepared comments. We've got a team of folks who are here to answer questions, and we'll open it up with that. Thank you.
I don't know. I read the whole thing and seemed reasonable.
Okay.
A couple of the written public comments had to do with the grading along the waterfront. Does that grading extend beyond the, I believe, ordinary high water line? Is that the proper term?
It does not. So our grading starts at the ordinary high water line and then, attempts to flatten some of the essentially vertical slopes along that bank to help some of the erosion concerns and then enhance that bank for habitat.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Mahoney?
One of my concerns, and I think it's been expressed throughout the hearings on this whole project, has been the protection of the cove in terms of conservation of habitat and things of this nature. Your excavation and cut and fill and whatever you guys do to move earth and how you refer to it, is that going to upset the balance there to any degree? Is that a question you can answer?
So some of the environmental piece might relate back to John Van Staveren, our environmental consultant. However, with the actual grading effort, there's a substantial amount of erosion control measures that will be required and put in place prior to that excavation. And then, kind of prior to the enhancement plantings going back in, interim and temporary stabilization measures before that material can take place and kind of restabilize that bank. But hopefully with the, laid back of the slopes and the grading that we're doing there with the erosion control measures, that will mitigate the impact to the water itself during the construction phase.
You don't plan on losing a D8 cat into the cove or something like that?
We certainly don't plan on it, no.
I do have a question for your environmental person, John, I believe it is.
Good evening, John Van Staveren.
Thank you. I hate to put words into Jerry Herman's mouth, but I believe one of the points that he made in his letter was that he has seen over time nature kind of doing its thing, and there are areas that maybe needed to be regraded previously that now perhaps don't, because the natural process has stabilized them. You understand what I'm getting at?
Yep.
And I think that was the point of Jerry's letter. Can you?
Well, he that's true, except that he did say in his letter about the east side still needing to be graded. And so that area is oversteepened and it will be graded so we can have a more natural connection between the water and the land. And right now we have these oversteepened banks, the cottonwoods there, many of them are older, they're not reproducing. And so what we're going to be doing is actually making that shallower, and then planting literally thousands of trees and shrubs, native trees and shrubs along that whole shoreline. He knows the cove very well. And I've talked to him about that, but I think he's talking more about on the northern side and then on the southern side. But no, he says in his letter, not on the eastern side, where most of that grading's going to occur.
Okay. Thank you.
The only thing I would add to that is that the city did have a water resource consultant and biologist take a look at the application as well. So with any consultant, we have two. We have the applicant's consultant as well as the city professional, double check those. And we did send this to David Evans and Associates, and Gigi Cooper did comment on that as well.
I do have a question. I haven't seen the site in a while. Are those pilings, the steel pilings still in the north end of the cove, and is anything gonna happen with those?
No. They're still there for sure. There's a
Okay.
lot of things in the water at a later phase, perhaps, and somebody else can talk more about that than I can. But
Okay, because I don't know if this
Not
serves
at
any
this point.
purpose right now.
yeah, there's no activity that's going to require they would require a permit with the state and federal agencies, and there's nothing we're doing right now would require that. There's nothing below the ordinary high water of the cove.
Okay.
Okay?
That's all I've got.
Anybody else have other questions before I go back to another one that I have? Okay, can we hear from your traffic guy for a second?
Absolutely.
Excuse me.
Hi.
Good evening. Diego Orgea with Kittleson and Associates, local transportation engineering and planning firm. What else do you need?
That's fine.
Okay, I can give you address or,
No. The angled parking is new with this, there wasn't angled parking proposed in the previous version, right?
Correct. On the on-street parking?
On-street angled
Correct.
parking. Okay, and is that just so you can get spaces, enough spaces in front of those two buildings that are gonna have the restaurant retail? Okay, so I guess. We'll
Sorry.
see. I'm gonna ask a question, then we'll see who
yeah,
has
in all
the answer.
seriousness, yeah, the site plan revisions in that regard and circulation, if you wanted to ask more of the reasons why, we'd probably have to pull Mike back up.
I guess more of my question is, what can you tell us about the safety of angled parking as opposed to parallel parking?
Safety for vehicles
Safety
or
for
for
accident, I mean,
pedestrians?
accident rates, however you want to address it. Because they're going to be backing out onto Agnes Avenue.
Correct. It's case by case. There's nothing out there that says, angled parking is safer or not as safe as parallel parking. It kind of depends on the environment. And my understanding, the way everything's been laid out, it's been designed as safe as possible. And the character and the nature of Agnes Avenue, the pedestrian friendly, the trees, the buildings close to the street is going to promote some kind of traffic calming that's going to promote more safe and cautious driving than you would just in a through major or minor collector street. But there's no silver bullet answer if that's what you're looking for. Unless you have a specific question about
No.
pedestrian
The absence of the
circulation.
silver bullet answer that's the answer.
Yeah, okay.
So there's nothing to say that's inherently more dangerous in the right location than parallel parking.
No, there's no black and white solution like that, right?
Okay.
We did also have John Riplinger, our traffic consultant, review this as well, and he did address safety in his memo. I think one of the things he was thinking about is that it's essentially a dead-end street. There's not a lot of, it's not like a major throughway, so the number of trips is rather limited as well. But
What exactly are we looking at here with the three different scenarios? They look very similar, and I'm not a traffic engineer, so I'm not really seeing the difference here. What are they showing us? The three different scenarios of the angled parking backing out.
Can you clarify? What are the three scenarios?
There was a document in the package that had line drawings of angled parking, and it was scenario 1 ingress, scenario 1 egress,
Yeah.
and then scenario 2 ingress and egress, and scenario 3. And I had that same question, Dirk.
They look identical. Are they different options, or what's the purpose of
I
it?
think when we can get to it's from the staff report.
Shall I pull that up?
Maybe not. Maybe we have an answer.
Is one more is safer, or I wasn't sure why they were showing us all those.
I just want to, clarify that the street sections for Agnes that are being discussed, the Public Works Department looked over and kind of said, conceptually, we're okay with these, but we're going to actually review them with the subsequent detailed development plan. So, you know, the extent of the findings for site distance and all the other requirements in chapter 12.04, which is our street section, it's not very detailed in this section, in this proposal. We just sort of have a conceptual blessing from Public Works that they're okay with these street sections, and then we'll review them in more detail with the subsequent DDP. But at the same time, yeah, we have an exhibit in the application that illustrates the backing movements for those parking spaces, so.
Well, since that is a public street, right?
Yes.
Okay, and it does come under the jurisdiction of Public Works for review.
Yes.
And because of that, if they find later on down the line that they don't really, because of their findings, review it, they can make modifications and require changes, right?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So whatever we do here tonight doesn't necessarily mean it's permanent, because Public Works can say this ain't gonna work after we reviewed it in depth.
No, but it's a good question, I think, to tackle this now.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
So,
Pete, I don't know if you have those exhibits that you can pull
Yeah,
up.
I can.
If I recall correctly, it was just diagrams showing effectively the turning movements that the angled parking does work and does function as kind of laid out.
There it is, Exhibit L. Up
Thank
two
you.
more.
Eagle eyes,
There it is.
that's my email.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, so the intent of these diagrams was to show that the parking as kind of laid out works in terms of getting a passenger vehicle into those stalls with cars. I think there were some concerns from Public Works early on that, you know, we didn't want to have cars having to kind of swing out into oncoming traffic
Right.
or across the center line to get in and out of stalls with vehicles parked in the adjacent stalls next to them. So the options here are just kind of different layouts in terms of if there's a larger vehicle parked next to one or a compact stall.
Okay.
Vehicle sizes.
And just the various ingress, egress options to show that it doesn't have to cross center line to get in and out of those stalls.
Okay.
Is the intent here then that a person would drive all the way to the end, go on the roundabout to come back to hit those parking spots?
They could, yes. That would be the
So
intent.
let's
We do
talk
not want
about
people
normal
turning.
people. Would they be able, is there enough room to make a left turn into those angled parking spots facing the opposite direction? Without
It's
stopping and
possible, but that is not the intent.
I thought the streets were divided.
There is no median at this location. There's a median further down on the south end of Agnes as you're coming off the roundabout to help kind of divert the traffic as you're approaching the roundabout and exiting the roundabout. But there would be no median along Main Street or along Agnes in this location. Just the center line stripe.
And then bicycle lanes, I'm not seeing it here. Are they dedicated?
There is a dedicated bike lane. That's the bold kind of line on the right side of that image there,
good.
between the parallel parking, ticks and
Right.
the street. The thought in the original amendments, in the original master plan was that if there were bicycles traveling southbound, that most of the time they would be using the Esplanade Trail,
Okay.
and that would keep them off the roadway.
Yeah, it'd be hard to see them if you're backing out around a
Correct.
van or something.
Correct. So there is no dedicated bike lane on that side of the street. It's on the east
Okay.
side of the street where everyone else would be using the Esplanade Trail most of the time if they're headed southbound.
Okay, that's a smart place to put them.
This is a pretty short street, is it 800 feet long or something like that, or 500?
From the roundabout to kind of the entrance into North Park, so that kind of first cul-de-sac there, it's about 1,600 feet.
1,600. What I was getting at is, it's a relatively short street, and it's not a major thoroughfare, is it connecting on some of the...
Correct, it's a dead end.
It's pretty much, what's the speed limit going to be proposed there? Or if there is a danger of backing out, what would be a normal speed limit in a compound like this, or a facility with residential and some storefronts and some restaurants? You know, it wouldn't be 35 miles an hour, I wouldn't think.
No, I think based on the city's classification of the roadway, I think it might be 30. However, because it's dead end and it's really only serving this development, and effectively ODOT has said this will never punch through to Highway 213 on the other end, I think it would make more sense to have this be a 25-mile-an-hour speed zone, which would be similar to other, having commercial-facing streets
And
and
depending
relatively
on-
low volume.
Depending on the crosswalks that go across to Agnes from the one complex to another, there could be a fair amount of walking traffic that says, put the speed limit down, lower yet in that short area.
Sure. Sure, yeah, and we have a couple different crosswalk locations. There's parallel parking. We kind of have the main crosswalk in that center area that is in line with the kind of main plaza space, public plaza space between the two A buildings. That'll be kind of an actual, almost like a raised flush crossing at that location, similar to what we have on Main Street that was recently constructed. And then there's crosswalk locations, kind of there's parallel parking shown on the east side of Agnes Avenue. There's crossings at either end of that to help facilitate people get across the street if they're parked on that side of the street. And then as well, kind of at the far south end as you come up the hill from the roundabout, and then the far north end as you approach the cul-de-sac.
And there is some bicycle lanes in there also?
There is a bike lane on the east side of the road. The west side bike lane was omitted because the thought would be that people are going to be, if they're traveling that direction, they're going to be on the water side, using the Esplanade Trail, the shared trail.
Okay.
Good, thank you.
Do we have any other questions for the applicant? Any more comments from you gentlemen? All right.
Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you. So we will move on to public comments, and I have two cards, Doug Neely and Dorothy Dalsrud. Why don't you both go ahead and come on up.
Thank you. Doug Neely, I'm chair of the Natural Resource Committee. Dorothy is also on that committee.
But I'm here as a private citizen.
And Jerry Herman is also on that committee.
And you're representing the committee?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You have a letter in your packet there. It's a very short one. But I do want to talk a little bit about the history. About the year 2000, the natural overlay applied to water bodies with anadromous fish in them was 200 feet. 2008, apparently, the Planning Commission had reduced it to 50. Now, I served on the City Commission both when the 200 feet was set up and in 2008. And I don't think either the City Commission or the Urban Renewal Commission was informed about that change at that time. Having said that, that's part of history. Our basic recommendation here, we recognize that grading will have to occur for, if no other reason, probably to meet the balanced cut and fill requirements of the site. We simply want to ask to extend the planting of plantings to extend beyond the 50-foot barrier, perhaps through the pathway and up to the esplanade, up to the apartments, so that at least the vegetation source is native material. And that's basically the request of the Natural Resource Committee.
For native plantings up to the promenade, instead of just in the first 50 feet.
That's correct.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Dorothy Dalsrud. I live here in Oregon City, and I visited this cove 4, 5, 6 times a week because I got a dog, and I've been doing it for at least 10 years. So I know this cove very well, and plus I know it even before that because I've been a resident since '75. And my husband's a concrete man. I know that concrete area. I know the Cove Apartments area. I know what slag has gone in there. I know what trash has gone in that area. And hallelujah is being fixed up. However, as I've seen and listened to many of these presentations, they've been very, very good, very, very thorough. but I've seen some crawdadding going on. Meaning, we say we're gonna do this, but now can we change it a little bit? The planting was a big one. 50 feet to 2,200 feet is a lot, and grading. So I would request, yes, please bring the natural environment, the natural planting up past 50 feet and into a 200 feet, because we have critters in that cove that are well established. I can tell you of no less, just in the cove, 2 active dens. One at the north bank, right at where all that slag metal that is. Very active den right there. I have been smacked by beaver tail. My dog has shown me. She gets in there and hovers, and I'm afraid she was gonna get injured. She does not belong in metro parks. I stand behind metro parks and no dogs, because I have that dog. But yes, and then in that same area during migrations, we have lost all of our tall trees. There was a certain amount of cottonwood that were gonna be left. Now there's no cottonwood except for on that peninsula, coming down all the way from North Park, all the way down into southwest curve. There's a substantial amount of very tall trees there. We're replacing in the natives only 1 Douglas fir, only 1 Oregon white oak. Those are our native trees. The others that are being placed that are native hybrids, those never get over a 45 foot. You will not see a blue heron land in that. You will not see from the peninsula and the second largest rookery, is that the right rook? Of osprey in Oregon that hunt that cove. And anyone has been there at least twice a week and hung for 2, 3, 4 hours will have seen a heron come down, snag, or not a heron, but an osprey snag a fish, or an eagle snag a fish, and 15 crows after him to pester him all the way up into the tall trees so he can save his game. It's wrong, we need tall trees. We will not see that happen in a 25, 35, or even smaller tree as what is proposed. We need tall trees so they have habitat. We need to be the example. I'm trying to whip this into 3 minutes. We need to be the example of what goes on in our rivers. We need to show that we embrace our native species, our native habitat, and that yes, we can maybe even plant some more habitat for the beaver so they can get up there and munch away at it, make little spindles all the way down along the riverside that kids pick up and poke around at things. They make perfect weenie hot cookers, marshmallow roasters. Maybe they will use them, or maybe they'll just poke around and whack at each other. But those are significant little beaver things. We need to have that habitat down there. We need our raptures. We need our big birds. We need tall trees. Tall tree is 75 feet and up. You can see an eagle go through Park Place because they still have tall trees. You will not see an eagle up here once those trees are gone.
May I come back with another comment? It is a recommendation that we made to John Van Staveren when he was before our committee. And at a subsequent meeting, Brian Chair was there too. So we are communicating directly with the developers. One of the concerns that we had in terms of tree plantings is most of the things we had there were deciduous trees as well. There weren't that many conifers. And most of those trees would be relatively short-lived, only 40 years old and so forth. We do recommend they put conifers there, which would be taller trees.
And
she's not suggesting they plant a 75-foot tree. I wanted to point that out.
Why not have 2 or 3 of them in? Why not?
I mean, you're not going to plant a 75-foot tree there. That's all I'm saying.
No, but grow to 75 foot or something that will grow back into its height. And why not have something that gets good trout roots that are drought tolerant, that are native, that will grow up?
Well, that should be the case in the 50 feet, and I hope it's extended beyond that.
Absolutely. What's wrong with an oak? It's a beautiful tree. And the last well over 300 years, well over 300 years. And it only needs water for the first 2 or 3.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you both very much.
I only got to 2, not the other 5 points. Just saying. Just saying. Remember our roots, remember a city of trees.
I have a
And
question.
we're a city of habitat, and there's
A
9
question for her. Yeah.
beaver coves in
Dee
there.
Dee, come back.
I'm
Got a
sorry.
question for you.
I had a question for you. Can you point out where the trees are with the nest?
Oh,
Can you get a laser
there's
point?
nesting, the rooks is actually on the other side of the
It's not the
Willamette.
peninsula there?
So the peninsula there are very tall trees, so they will land in those trees. There's a beaver den on the back side of that peninsula. There's a beaver den where the meadow is. There's a beaver den on the north end. Then if you go out Doll Beach, there's a beaver den. Around over to our public docks, there's, oh gosh, you should see the water slides they have built. Why we don't have night cams beyond me. It might help a lot of camping and a lot of illegal activity if we want to put night cams on our beaver. But they will swoop and they will come off that peninsula because they're looking for food. You can call them in. They nest on that backside by the Tri-City Water area. There's a nesting platform there. There's a nesting platform on that little peninsula, which they've never landed there. They keep going into the trees in the rookery. But they will go swoop from that peninsula over to that where the garden apartments, little horseshoe is right there. And they'll land in that little grouping of tall trees there for protection, eat, drop, or go.
Okay. And,
It's just the native, the way prey is.
Thank you, Dorothy.
That is
Thank
an
you.
active water. If you were a bird person, you would hang there like all the time. And I whistle, walk with my dogs and hang there all the time.
A follow-up question along the lines of Dirk made. On the peninsula out here, it shows a fair amount of trees, and I've walked through there, not in the last 6
A lot of
months or so.
invasive species.
What type of trees and what height of trees generally?
As
Are
tall
they?
as you can get, and the
No, I mean,
are
what
perfectly
type
fine.
are growing on that peninsula today?
I think
Are there
mainly,
75-foot
I
trees
think
there?
mainly, yeah, they're all those dogwoods, or not dogwoods, excuse me,
Cottonwood?
cottonwoods, those black cottonwoods, they're all ranging around 75 to 100 feet tall.
And to his questions, some of that follows around the north end of the park. and
Yes,
are
but
back
we're
over
losing
here by
all of
Which ones
the
are
Tri-City Water District.
south, yeah, there'll be a little bit left up there, but then we'll lose all of that south in the loop.
Right.
You can leave a
I
few
was-
tall trees in there.
I just didn't pay attention to the height of these trees over there
Yeah,
on the strip.
and there's, and if you look in our neighborhoods, everything is hybrid and nothing gets over 45 foot.
Thank you, Dorothy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, at this point, 5 minutes for rebuttal from the applicant.
Thank you. And we did have representatives from our team at the last Natural Resources Committee meeting, so we're familiar with those issues and the some of the comments and thoughts that were just offered. So, I've kind of been talking to folks on the team. We're comfortable with a condition of approval that would, obviously the NROD mitigation plantings are native, but we would be comfortable with the condition of approval that would extend that, the intent to plant native plant materials up between the buildings and the water, beyond that NROD, 50-foot NROD zone, as a way of ensuring that you have a native habitat as much as possible through that area. So I think that would be something that we could offer that may address some of that concern that we just heard.
I have a question. How many trees are you planning to remove there on the peninsula? Given the fact that from what I've heard,
Zero, hopefully.
there's where the large tall trees exist.
Right. John Mansever can speak more to the mitigation, but my understanding is we're simply taking out non-native vegetation but I don't believe there's any intent to take trees down on that.
No, there's
right?
no.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yep, John Van Staveren again. There are no trees being taken down on the peninsula.
There are none.
Correct.
And the big tall trees exist where?
We have cottonwood trees along the east side, and those are going to be taken down, adjacent to the proposed development.
Are
And
there
then
any trees that will be removed in the North Park area?
I don't believe, well, maybe a few, but I don't think so. Really along the shoreline.
Yeah.
And as far as putting trees back, we have already in the planting list, big leaf maple, which can grow easily over 100 feet, and also oak. So those are over. And also, as Reed said, we were at the Natural Resource Committee and did hear the need or the request for conifers.
And you cut the trees down after the nesting season?
Yes, they're very strict about that because of the Migratory Bird Act. So you have to cut them down at a certain time of year, make sure there are no active nests in the
And have
in the
any
trees.
active nests been identified?
No active nest as far as like osprey or anything large. You know, I'm sure there are active nests as far as
Yeah.
songbirds go.
But no eagles, ospreys?
Nothing that we've seen. Right.
Boy, it seems to me that this would be a golden opportunity, just golden, for you people to really step in there and take the lead for conservation of as much wildlife in that area and to maintain it as a conservation area, so to speak. Just pull out all the stops and do what you can to retain that and keep it as natural as you possibly can.
Right.
I mean, that's just a magnificent opportunity, especially since it's riverfront, you know, and it's active with wildlife. I mean, I know your residents would appreciate that and some of the activity that goes on along that river. My goodness gracious, it'd be a selling point for that. So whatever you can do to maintain that, you know, as part of your policy.
And Armand just reminded me that after the last Natural Resources Committee meeting, we've had several team meetings since then, and the instruction to our landscape architect has been to revise our previous plan and go with all native plantings in that zone between the buildings and the water. So there are efforts being made to address that now.
So from the buildings to the water will be native plantings, and you're comfortable with that being a conditional approval?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions? I kind of got the high sign from Pete that Mr. Neely would like to speak again, and I know that's a little unusual. We're kind of getting out of order, but we'll give you the opportunity to come back again as well if you feel that's necessary. Mr. Neely?
My comments are on the cottonwoods. If you're talking around the apartments, personally, I believe they should be removed. They are extremely dangerous. They oftentimes rot out at the top and come falling down. The Greater Oregon City Watershed Council had a cleanup going on of ivy along the Clackamas River. And while the Oregon City Junior ROTC were working on that, we had a 15-foot top of a cottonwood come down very close to the students. My car was parked at one spot, and when their pickup was parked, it happened to land right in between the vehicles, fortunately. But you know, on the peninsula, it's fine, but you're going to have more pedestrian use along the path there, and I don't think in that particular area cottonwood should remain. They can be very, very dangerous.
Thank you.
That's a good point.
It's a disease type thing that would take a tree out whether we wanted to or not, right? Yeah, good point.
Would you like to come back up, or you?
No.
Okay. All right, so at that point, we will close the public hearing. And any questions for staff?
We have some draft condition of approval amendments for you too, based off the discussion this evening.
Okay.
Would you like us to start first? Okay. So Pete already showed you the recommended amendments for condition of approval number 21, which basically we want to clarify that you can only work within the geologic hazard zone between May 1st and October 31st, and the wording made it almost look like you should not work within that. So we want to make sure that we're crystal clear. The other thing is condition of approval 43. I'm going to read the current version of that condition, and then I'm going to read a proposed red line based off your conversation as well. Currently, it reads, prior to the final of the mass grading permit, the applicant shall submit a landscaping plan and install landscaping between the temporary parking lot on Lot 1 and the street with native ground cover and shrub every 4 feet. Proposed amendment would be to extend that sentence to add and regrade the parking lot, resulting in an even surface. Let me say that one more time. And regrade the parking lot, resulting in an even surface. So from bumpy gravel to more smooth gravel is the intent there. And then the last proposed amendment for the condition of approval would be adding condition of approval 45. And it relates to the native species that you've discussed. There is no criteria that we could identify to require native plants in that area. So this condition reads, the Planning Commission encourages the applicant to utilize native species for all planting between Phase 2 buildings and the Cove water body. That's it.
So you don't, there's nothing that we can say requires that?
There's not, but it
Right.
sounds like the applicant has
Right, sounds like we
proposed
have
that.
an agreement.
Question? Does that include Mr. Neely's suggestion that we move up into the project, some of those, extension of some of the landscaping that, is that going to be included?
Yeah, so it encourages the applicant to install only native plants between the water of the cove and the buildings in Phase 2. Now they're only required to do it for the first 50 feet as a part of the Natural Resource Overlay District. You can't require them to do it. Sounds like they're amenable to plant plants that whole space though. So this condition, you're encouraging them to do so, but not requiring it.
Why can't we require it as part of a condition?
Because there's no nexus to any approval criteria that we can identify, unless you can identify one. I'm just saying we can't identify one, so we put it as our recommendation. Because the NROD has already been reduced, so you can't require things to act like an NROD when it's not an NROD.
So we strongly recommend, is that the idea?
I can throw strongly in there. However you want me to word it, we are here to serve you.
Put strongly in.
All right.
Any questions on those revised conditions that Ms. Turway has just brought forth? Everybody good with that?
I want to
Okay.
commend,
What other,
I want to commend the staff. That's, what you guys did is overwhelming. I mean, the behind-the-scenes evaluation of the code and putting this application together with the applicant is, I think, commendable. This is going to be quite an improvement to that area down there. It's going to be the tip of the spear for development in the north part of the city. And it's going to take a neighborhood association and add some pretty active people down there. So my hat's off to our staff. Job well done.
Commissioner Johnson, anything you want to add?
No, I don't think so.
No? Okay. Anything from this side of the group? Everybody good?
Good.
All right. Do we have a motion?
I'm going to make a motion, but I need some, what is it here?
Would you like me to say it for you?
Yeah, would you?
All right, because only because I have all the files and there's a lot of them.
Oh, what a gal.
Do you want me to pull up the front slide?
We have just, we've created a new file number called General Land Use Applications. So you haven't seen this before or too much, but you can refer to that when you make motions now. So that's new. In this case, you can make a motion if you would like to recommend approval with conditions as specified for GLUA 18-40.
So moved.
I didn't make the motion, but yes. if
You expect me to repeat that?
So it's GLUA 18-40 if you would like to recommend approval with conditions as identified.
You want to read, I'm serious, you want me to repeat it?
So moved is
Okay.
sufficient, yeah.
So moved covers it, okay.
Yeah.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Moved by Commissioner Mahoney, seconded by Commissioner Gage. Any further discussion? Call the roll.
Commissioner Mahoney,
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson,
Aye.
Commissioner Schlagenhofer,
Aye.
is that right?
Right.
Commissioner Gage,
I,
Commissioner Stoll,
Aye.
Chair Mitchell,
Aye.
motion passes.
Great. Okay. Moving on, communications.
All right. I sent you an email to the link to the boards and committees manual that Katie had showed you earlier tonight. And then I have some statistics I will be sending you. I have them with me, but they're in my bag over there. So I will give you our 2018 statistics for the Community Development Department, which includes the building and the planning departments. So I will pass them out to you and we'll attach them to our agenda next meeting. Also, we will not have a meeting next meeting. I'm not exactly sure when our next meeting will be because we don't have any applications ready to go. So we'll look at maybe assembling a work session between you and another group. Is there anything that you would like us to talk about? Do you want to have another legal meeting? Do you want to, what would you prefer? You want to take the day off?
Any thoughts?
Let's take a day off.
Days off are good.
Okay.
We had plenty of reading on this one. It wouldn't, it wouldn't-
You earned
it wouldn't
it.
hurt my feelings. And Pete, I should have said this before everybody left, but I'm not buying 40 hours. That had to have been more than that.
yeah,
That was, I kept opening documents. 72 pages, like, really?
That's just that was just the formatting part.
That was great work. Any other comments?
I've got a question actually for you guys. In regards to the emails that we've already received over the last couple of weeks in our personal accounts, would it be best to just forward those to the city account and call good?
Yes.
Yeah, forward them to your city account, delete them for your personal account.
Perfect.
okay.
You'll be good.
Great.
I got a question for William. On these personal addresses, they're secure, I mean, I hate to use the word hack, but could they be hacked?
When you say the personal, are you talking about the Oregon City addresses?
Yeah.
You know, almost any computer system can be hacked. Most of the time that it happens, it's because of actions taken by persons within the system, clicking on inappropriate links, opening attachments, those types of things are really the problem. So can they be hacked? Absolutely. However, I will say that the city has a pretty good system of protection, virus protection and other such things that are well beyond my ability to understand. So it's a pretty secure system. It is, given the number of users and how much information and how many different things it goes into, it's actually in pretty good shape, and there's different levels of security. For example, the police system has another layer on top of it, and there's, certain things that are much more, the human resources department has additional layers, and so it's pretty good. But the main threat is probably user error more than anything else. If the Russian government decided they wanted to infiltrate Oregon City's servers and put the resources into it, they could probably do it. But the reality is they're unlikely to do that. The bigger issue is somebody clicking on the wrong thing.
Well, some of the things I've called Mr. Putin, I'm sure I'm on his
You're on his hit list, huh? Okay, anything else?
Yeah, I have a question. If I have a question for city staff, but it has nothing to do with city business, do I send an email with a personal email, or do I still use the city email account?
I would recommend limiting the city system for city business. So if you have a friend who works for the street department and you want to say, hey, you want to go out and have dinner this weekend, that's not city business, and doing it through your personal account would probably be better.
Okay. But I've had a question for Pete, but it didn't have to do with anything we're doing, but it had to do with planning.
It's starting to sound like there's a spectrum, obviously. There are things that are clearly, nope, and clearly yes. And, you know, the idea that it has something to do with planning makes me itchy in terms of, yeah, it's probably
Let's
related
say
to
looking
city
at a
business.
house and the lot was kind of iffy and I had a question, what do you know about this thing? But personally,
Personal, yeah, so if it's about your personal, looking at purchasing it,
Yeah.
yeah, then that's probably personal business, personal
Okay.
email.
all right, that's what I need to know.
Or, for instance, if I have a question of John Lewis about, hey, why is there no stop sign on this corner or whatever? I'm a private citizen at that point, right? It has nothing to do with planning?
Unless unless that was driven by something that came out of a meeting, you know, like, after this, you come back and you'd say, John, hey, how come there's nothing what's going on with the angle parking down on Agnes?
Ah, okay.
And so, you know,
So
it's
if there's
gonna
a
be
connection to
contact.
planning commission business of any sort, be safe and put it there.
Yeah.
But if I just want to know something that's
Yeah,
nothing.
it's like you're driving down the street and you see, this is silly, why don't we fix that? And you want to put that into John.
Okay.
A follow-on question like that, when we get from Pete or Laura from this, or anybody that sends us 300-page staff reports and all of that, we're the receiver of it. What do we need to do with that? We'll study it and do that, but do we need to do anything with saving it or this, that, or the other thing, or is that already taken care of by the senders who sent it to us?
That, if it's from a city email address and you're the recipient, you're not the custodian. The sender is. So, you know, after this, you can delete it.
We can delete that or file it or however we want to access it 2 months later or.
Yeah, if you want to retain it, no, I'm gonna get slapped by Katie if I say this, but I'm fairly certain the answer is that you are not the custodian. Once this proceeding is done, you can delete it, and probably should. You know, at the same time, I can see some situations where something that one of the planners gives you is really useful. It breaks down, you know, some situation, and you're like, I could use that again, you know, and maybe you want to put it in there, and that might be some things. But, you know, the way things are set up, it is a sender who's a custodian, and they're responsible for it. You're generally going to delete those messages when you're done using them. If it comes from outside the city system, your neighbor or, you know, somebody, a citizen who has a concern, you are then the custodian and you need to maintain that. And, you know, one of the things that Katie mentioned I think is a good idea is getting used to kind of categorizing and putting them into folders. And so, you know, whatever makes sense to you. It could be by date. You know, this is a January 2019 folder. Here's a February 2019. Or it could be by project. Or it could be by neighborhood, you know. But whatever makes sense to you to categorize it so that you can track it back down.
Okay, what about citizen concerns? Should we be giving them our email addresses if they want to send us a picture? Or let's say we see them on the street and they say, I have a question about this. Should we direct them to staff or?
You can always
Away
direct them
from us?
straight to us. If you get something on your email, then send it to us, but we'll take over from there.
Yeah, ideally, you know, the idea is that when you're sitting up here, you're acting like a judge and you kind of have some blinders on. The only thing you're supposed to use to make your decision is things that are in the record or that people testify to and the criteria at issue.
Okay.
Let's say you know there's a big problem out there, but it's not in the staff report or nobody's brought it up. The time to do that is, you know, maybe as staff is given their staff report, say, you know, Pete, I happen to live down the street and they've completely missed this whole thing here. And you know, so that this is an important piece of evidence that you are making your decision on. The applicant, as well as the rest of the public, should know what it is and have the ability to either challenge you on it or say, yeah, he's right, that's really a problem.
Okay.
So along that same line, when we get a staff report, it's sent to us, they're controlling it. Now, I have a question on that staff report while I'm doing my homework. In the past, we've always had the luxury of walking down to the planning department and talk. Or if we should decide to make a file out of excerpt out of the thing and then put our questions down on the bottom of it and send it back to staff for clarification, maybe not lobbying anything
Right.
whatsoever.
Yeah, no, if you have questions, you can still walk down and talk to Pete, call him on the phone or send an email back and just kind of say, hey, I was looking through the staff report on page 17, you said this, and am I understanding you right that what you meant was this? Or, having that email, then you're the sender of it. And so you're the custodian of that email to Pete.
It's fairly common that we would get phone calls from planning commissioners just asking us to clarify or.
But that doesn't necessarily have to be part of the record unless you specify it. Right.
Because there's that, we had one here recently, a meeting where staff was talking to different people here and they were concerned that we shouldn't be doing that talking. And I think you made it clear at the time or shortly after that no, that's part of the staff's job is to communicate with the decision makers, whatever their level they're at. And it's not telling secrets or giving how to do this or anything like that.
Yeah, that's correct. The thing that you don't want to do is communicate with each other.
Right.
There are some pretty, because in Oregon, all meetings of public bodies have to be open to the public. And if 3 or 4 of you, or 4 or 5 is a number, if a quorum of you are communicating, the public isn't seeing that.
Yeah.
And so that's one thing you have to be careful of. And I want to be careful also, Pete said something that's right, but, that your question to Pete saying, hey, can you explain a little bit more about this thing, is not necessarily part of the record in terms of, the decision-making record that you made, because he's just explaining the criteria and how it applies to the evidence. The rest of, the public doesn't have to see that. It's not really part, unless you want to make it part. The fact that it's not part of the record for the land use decision doesn't mean that email in and of itself isn't a public record. So, it's.
That's the tricky one.
and
Yeah, they could ask for those if they wanted them.
right, and those would be public.
Okay, yeah, because our questions would be more like, I don't quite understand this.
Yeah.
Can you explain what's going on?
That's what our job is to help you through that.
Some of it's complicated.
In considering the technicalities of the
Right.
findings that are going to come from the staff report, because that's where the information originates and that's where the application originates. Should we be hearing it for the first time at the public hearing and not looking at the staff report online and say, oh, I'm going to contact the staff before the public hearing and get some clarification on this? Or shall we just wait until we hear it for the first time at the meeting and then ask the question?
I'll let Pete, my instinct is to ask for the clarification ahead of time, because it could be, in a staff report like this, there's a lot of information, a lot of things you're doing, and frankly, things can always be explained better. People learn and understand things in different ways, and so, if in fact you're having difficulty parsing through it, you may not be the only one, and it will give a chance to realize, hey, here's something I can do a better job at. And so asking for that clarification ahead of time. And, the reality is you could find something where, we need to deal with that, and it's so, let's, putting it out there beforehand I think is probably the better course. I'll get the
Yes.
answer for you.
Yes, no, that's great. And we can get you a better answer if we have time to think about things too.
It'll all become clearer 3 weeks from now when we've used it a little bit and we know not ways around it, but if you use the telephone or walk in to the office, then you're not venturing into the sender mode and control mode yourself. You don't want to avoid it and never use it, obviously, but some of the minor stuff, until we figure out what's connected to a public meeting and what's not, We'll figure it out.
The other thing to keep in mind is that anything you send can be, the way someone once told me is, don't put anything in an email that you don't want to see in the newspaper the next day. So,
Anything else?
The financial disclosures that we're supposed to make to the state, how does that work and when? And
that should be coming, usually comes in March, I think. It's supposed to be April.
is it tax day?
It used to be related, did they move that to May now? It's been a little while.
I don't know.
But yeah, your list is now your name is now on a list down at the Oregon Government Ethics Commission. They'll send you an email. Hopefully we gave them your Oregon City email and that's what it'll go to. I think it's now all online, if I recall.
So something will prompt us to do that at the appropriate time.
Yeah.
Yes, our city recorder is responsible for making sure everybody does it, and
Very good.
she keeps track.
Easy to
I
hold up.
thought I heard January, and so I wasn't sure, so.
No. The other thing is we never really said thank you and welcome for joining
Yeah.
the planning commission too. We sort of got started when we had a lot going on. So the fact that we have people who applied, particularly in this last year when we had such big, complicated applications and so much volume of work and extra meetings is really, it's really nice to know that you guys care about the community and are helping, and it is a tough job.
This was a doozy to
Thank
get
you.
started on, boy.
Yeah, we dove right into the deep end.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody. Anything else? We're adjourned.
Okay, so we cancel February 11th.
Okay, cool.
City,